From the beginning, our fates were sealed. A hero with no fate, but many destinies.
Hi, I'm Tim Weaver from CMVG.
And hi, I'm Matthew Castle from CVG.
And Matt, we were going to kick this off with a great impression of a wizard, but I think instead we'll probably just review the game.
I think that's for the best.
Yeah. So you've played tons of Amalur, and you're pretty impressed by it.
Yeah, I am. I guess my big kind of concern with it was whether or not there was going to be a place for another big open world RPG, in the wake of Skyrim, currently sort of dominating so many people's playtime. But it's actually a very, very different kind of game to Skyrim. It's a lot more action focused. It's
a bit more like Fable, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I say Fable is the closest thing. In fact, the controls on 360 at least are exactly the same as Fable's. It's an action RPG, and it's all based towards the sort of simplicity of the action. So it's like a lot of single button combat and sort of different timings on the buttons to do mad combos and things.
Because the combat seems quite slick and quite visceral in a way perhaps that Elder Scrolls, for all that it does brilliantly, isn't.
Yeah, and that's always been the problem with the RPG, is it's fundamentally, it's a big mass of numbers, whirring away under the hood, and it's kind of like this stick with this many numbers hitting this, and so it's more about the kind of statistics than the actual experience. But here, this is much closer to, something like God of War. It's about kind of evasive dodges, timing your counters with your shields, about slicing people up. There's also sort of a vague sort of quick-timey events to some of the finishers and things. So it's very much about how it looks and how it sort of feels in your hand. It's quite sort of fast-paced.
And of course, it started out life as an MMO,
yeah.
And there's still a lot of that kind of.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
The game.
One of my biggest complaints is that as an open world, it doesn't actually convince as like a big kind of coherent landmass, because it's designed with like an MMO mentality, and that it's kind of like little areas, what they call zones in MMOs, joined by corridors. So it's quite clear when it's loading up the next sort of chunk of the land. So, where you have Skyrim and you look at it and you're like, whoa, I can go to the top of that mountain. Here you sort of go, whoa, I can go 20 metres that way, and then I've got to load up the next area.
And just watching you play it, it's got that real, like, you go into an area and you it kind of looks like it should be quite expansive, but you're actually sort of funneled into a certain area in order to have a scrap.
Absolutely, and it's very fun. That's also my other kind of big criticism of it, is that it's basically just a whole lot of go into this area and fight X number of this thing. The combat is so much time's been put into it that they feel the need that everything has to end with combat. It's not like, where you can decide, like, I'm going to try and talk it out, or I'm going to approach this stealthily. And there is a vague stealth mechanic, but I don't think it's particularly full thought out. So everything's kind of scrap focused. But, part of that works because you go in and it's very sort of accessible, and you can just sort of dip into it, and it's sort of fun and sprightly in little bursts. And the other good thing about the kind of splitting the world up in the way that they do is it's very gamey. You can have like a deep dark swamp, and then you go down a corridor, and then you're on like Ice Mountain or whatever. Where Skyrim has to be more coherent.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the kind of it doesn't owe that kind of debt to its lands.
So I guess finally people will be wanting to know, how this stacks up against Skyrim. I mean, if they've already bought Skyrim, should they get this?
It depends. Really depends what you want from your RPG. I mean, I guess the major difference is this doesn't take as much like investment to get into, because it's very, very sort of light and easygoing, very friendly to pick up, which is a great thing for many people, because you don't want to have to remember how the world works, and it's just very, very accessible and friendly. At the same time, they call it role-playing game for a reason. Some people like to have a place that they can sort of immerse themselves into and just disappear for a few hours. This, I could only ever really handle it for like 2-3 hours max, and I'd get bored, and it's basically quite a shallow action game stretched out to 100 hours. Does the world need that? I don't know, but it's definitely enjoyable, just not the be-all and end-all.
Now is your time.